I get started.
So tell us how you got inspired by Vincent van Gogh.
Well, go ahead then.
Well, we were living in Cheverly, Maryland, and I was working at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and doing the missions, the Gemini, Apollo missions, and then we had to have someone on duty 24 hours a day. So I was working there by myself, so we had someone come in from the head office in Boston to take over a 12-hour shift, and we worked rotating 12-hour shifts. And so I was going into work about 11 o'clock one night, and the car was coming toward me, swerved over into my side of the road. So I put on the brakes and headed to the right-hand side, but there was a guardrail, and I got right up against the guardrail, and I came to almost a total stop when that car coming toward me just literally came right up over top of me, because I had a little tiny Triumph Spitfire, a very low-built car, and this Ford went right over my head. I was looking at the bottom of it as it passed over me, and so I was hurt pretty bad. I would pass out, and I would come to and pass out and come to, and there was a group of people standing around, and I said, oh, somebody can steal my billfold or anything. I just can't do anything about it. And finally, a deputy sheriff showed up, and I felt relieved about that. And then the ambulance showed up, and in those days there was no EMT on an ambulance. It was just two teenage kids and driving an ambulance. So they were not medically experienced, I know, because one of them looked at me and he says, "Jesus Christ, this man's in shock." And I thought, this kid doesn't know what he's talking about. So they rolled me in the ambulance and rolled me on into the hospital, and I had passed out again. And when I woke up, then there was someone sewing up my forehead. I had a bad gash across my forehead, and there was someone sewing that up. And I looked up, and it was a woman, and I don't know why, but I said, "Are you a nurse?" And she says, "No, I'm the doctor." And she took that next stitch a lot deeper than she had to, which I thought was kind of spiteful. But she finished up the forehead and started to walk away, and I said, "Could you take a look at my ear? Because it hurts." And she looked, and she said, "Oh, yeah." It was about half of it torn off. So she sewed my ear back on, and Joanne just knew it was me, right?
Well, I had just fixed him dinner before he went to work, and was cleaning up in the kitchen, and I heard the ambulances, and I don't know, something kind of just went through me. Someone at the scene of the accident got hold of your billfold or something and your number, because it wasn't the police that called me, and called and said, "Your husband's been involved in an accident. They're taking him to Prince George's Hospital." So I immediately went next door and got my neighbor, and she came over to stay with the kids, and I drove over to the hospital. And when I got there, though, you have to remember this was early 60s, and public places and hospitals and things, they weren't as willing to give you information. They weren't as willing to deal with you. It was like they weren't going to tell you anything. And I had a really difficult time trying to find out where you were, how you were, if you were alive, if you were dead, if you were, what kind of condition you were in. It probably took me 3 hours before I found out anything about you and the condition that you were in at the time. It was very nerve-wracking. So, glad you're sitting next to me.
And I did go home that night.
Yeah.
But I remember we had to call and get someone else to fly down from Boston to take the other 12-hour shift. So yeah, that had to be set up the next morning. And I remember, I hurt all over. My whole body hurt.
Well, you'd been slammed around a bit.
Yes.